listening to the Film Yappers, the podcast where two film buffs, with too many opinions and just enough credentials, dive deep into the movies you love, the ones you hate, the ones you pretend to have seen, or the ones you are ashamed to admit that you love. From cult classics to fresh releases, they break down what works, what doesn't, and why it matters, one reel at a time. Dr. William Wells, intellectual historian and culture critic, is joined by his co-host and independent filmmaker Ethan Korpinen. Yappers, take it away.
So this is our inaugural podcast together. I had another podcast before that lasted all of 2 episodes. So hopefully this one will last a little bit
We
longer.
get to 3, that would be a huge milestone.
We've got to get to 3.
Yeah.
We've got to get to 3. But today's topic is The Mist. Stephen King wrote the original story, and then it was directed by Frank Darabont, and came out in 2007. 2 hours, 6 minutes, rated R, though I imagine that's for the, for violence and language. There's not really anything too spicy in it for most audiences, but the violence and the language gets a little rough, especially with Miss Carmody. So, Ethan, what was your first, before I give the summary, what was your first impression of the film?
I think it has a really interesting setup. I like the fact that by the time the film starts, the sort of phenomenon has already started, like literally in the opening scene, you can see the mist kind of hovering over the pond next to their house, right? And yeah, it just has this really intriguing kind of setup as far as how many interesting questions it raises. You hear screaming from the people inside the mist. You're like, oh, is there something in there? Is it like, is it just toxic? Like, is it just dangerous chemicals? Like, what is it? You never suspect that it's going to be something as crazy as what it ends up being, right? It's very like Lovecraftian, a lot of interesting like creatures, and trigger warning if you're an arachnophobe, by the way.
So your impressions kind of like mine, and I think a lot of people, when they first encountered the film, were not sure, if they had not read the novella, they weren't sure what to expect,
Right.
because the fog. There's another movie where the fog is haunted, John Carpenter film. And so just like us as the viewers, the audience coming into the film, the people in the film don't know what it is. Fog, mist, is it something toxic? They're all trying to decide, is it, is it some kind of acid cloud? And then what we come to realize is that the mist represents sort of a portal to another dimension. And so, to summarize, to give you an idea of what the film is about for our listeners, the mist takes place in a small town in Maine, near a lake and near a government research project that's very mysterious called Project Arrowhead. We're never really told what all was involved at Project Arrowhead, but when the film opens, there's a big storm. A local artist who creates movie posters. In fact, he
Yeah.
seems to be working on the movie poster for The Dark Tower. The the artist is a guy named Drayton, I believe that's his name. They have a neighbor who is a big city lawyer who they do not get along with, and they've been having major legal issues with. And since he's a lawyer, he seems to be very litigious and he's kind of frustrating to deal with. So the storm hits, and we really just kind of see the aftermath. A tree crashes into their house,
Mhm.
another tree from the neighbor's yard falls on the the boathouse and destroys their boathouse.
Yeah.
And the neighbor himself, who's to blame for not cutting down that tree, as they've been asking for years, tree falls on his car as well. So
Karma, right? I mean,
yes,
yeah.
it's you feel like that was definitely deserved a little bit.
Mhm.
Incidentally, I'll say, and I'll make comments about this a little more. He is a much less likable character in the novella. He he
Oh,
does he is he even though there is some ambivalence where they're trying to maybe become friends, there at the beginning, he's not a very nice person.
mm,
On and other things they didn't go into
yeah.
film, but he's played by Andre Brower.
Yeah. Rest in peace, by the way. Do they kind of explore their conflict prior to the events of the story? Because
There's a
there's
little
like
bit.
there's a lawsuit that was mentioned when they get into this like altercation in the supermarket when he doesn't believe him that there's like a thing down there. He's like, "Oh, you're just trying to get back at me from that lawsuit. You won and everything." And it's like you just couldn't take that, and he had to like yeah.
Yeah, the novella does a it goes into it actually goes into a lot more detail, sort of up front,
Hmm.
as far as just their conflicts as being neighbors. He seems to just be looking for ways to pick fights with people.
Oh,
And
okay.
with the one thing that they didn't go into in the movie, but he's just lost his wife from cancer. So
Oh,
he's alone,
hmm,
and it's made him maybe a little more bitter and cranky.
yeah,
So Drayton talks to his wife. She says, "Go into town. We've lost power. The food's going to go bad. We need to get some supplies." The neighbor goes with them, even though there's some tension. They try to be friendly to each other, and that it's clear they're trying to be civilized. And so they get to the store, and we meet several characters there. Um, and once they're in the store, the mist rolls in, and it's this ominous, very thick white cloud. And as the mist is coming in, um, we see a person that runs screaming into the store. It says, "Something took John Lee in the mist." And
yeah,
now the conflict is kind of set up. What's in the mist? So, what happens in the rest of the film is we see how these various characters who are trapped in a grocery store are going to deal with this threat that is approaching. There are monsters in the mist, and
oh
they
yeah.
are monsters unlike anything that anybody has ever imagined.
Mm.
They're not like anything really. They're very
On this
strange.
planet, yeah,
Kind of an alternate universe, an alternate dimension, another planet. And while we're in the store, we learn some pieces are put together um, about Project Arrowhead through some army guys who were about to
right.
leave on vacation.
One of them being Private Jessup, who is a
Yes,
very
yes,
important and tragic character, I might add. He's
yeah.
probably the
Yeah.
character I think went through just I don't know, he went through a lot.
He
Yeah.
he 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 has quite an emotional journey.
Yeah,
And
quite the
and
devastating arc, yeah.
yeah. He's you can't help him. Played by Sam Witwer, who's such a
Mhm.
talented actor. This is not um a scenario where people are going to fight back against the monsters. It's not there, and there's not a big villain to take. Well,
Well, kind
there's not a monstrous
it's not one
villain.
of the monsters,
It's
it's a
not the
person
mist that's
trapped
the
in the
villain.
store with him, which is arguably even worse, you know? Yeah.
That's exactly right. What
Mhm.
we have is essentially a lifeboat, or where the store is the lifeboat, and there's not, leaving the store, which they do twice, I guess. Once as a small group, they feel like they need to go to a pharmacy to get some medical supplies to help some of the injured. That goes terribly wrong. And then the big breakout, where things have degenerated in the store socially so much that a faction led by Drayton, um, they they by force they leave the store.
Yeah.
So, but that's not to say that that's when Drayton, the two times Drayton leaves the store. I should have said there were other people that left the store. So,
Earlier in the film when they
yeah,
rope
yeah,
the ropes to themselves to see if they make, like, 300 feet. Yeah. Really
right.
intense scene.
But before they know what's happening, and he's tied to this tether.
Yeah.
Um, and by the way, we assume at that point that Brower's, I guess Norton is the neighbor's name.
Yeah.
That Norton's group, they leave the store early without having any idea what's in the mist. They just decide, we're not going to stay here. We're going to go try to find help, and we're going to walk right out into it. And the this biker character says, I'll walk out there with them, and has a tether tied to him, so
Yeah.
they would know that he made it. He was going to try to get a gun
Mhm.
from his truck. So he's just going as far as the parking lot.
Yeah.
As far as we know, that those people were killed. Unlike the other character, this lady, and her name's never given in the story.
Mhm.
She is crying out, asking everyone in the store, please go with me. My kids are left home alone. I have to get to my kids. And absolutely no one will go with her.
Mhm.
And there's this moment where, and you really feel like, even our hero, Drayton, he's like, I've got my own boy to take care of.
Right.
I'm not going out in that. But you really, it's just kind of another fault in humanity here.
Mhm.
Um, just like Miss Carmody, who's going to turn into a fanatic and
Yeah.
rob the rest of the store.
Yeah.
In this case, nobody's willing to go with this woman,
Mhm.
because she's right in the sense that, yeah, if you don't get home to your kids, you may not know what it is, but we are going to later learn, yeah, terrible things
Mhm.
are going to happen.
Yeah, that's
So,
by the way, that's a really, like on the rewatch, I noticed, like, that's a really haunting shot, the shot where she's, like, first walking out and kinda just disappearing
yeah,
into the
yes,
mist, and you like, it kinda holds on that for a couple of seconds. You have
yeah,
to hear a scream, and you don't, you're like, "Well, what happened to her?" You know? And you still kind of immediately expect the worst, despite the fact that you don't really get any, like, scream or confirmation that anything happened until the end when you figure out she's actually completely fine, and made it out with her kids.
another difference
Yeah.
between the story and the movie. that's real, that's really significant. And I think Stephen King, knows what he's doing when he's writing, as far as leaving some things ambiguous for a reason. He and the two senior citizens and his son are driving away,
Mhm.
and Laurie Holden's character. So they're driving away. In the movie, they go to his house to get his wife, and she's gone. He sees her in a horrible state.
Mhm.
In the novella, instead, Drayton's car pulls up to the drive, realizes there's no way she's alive, and keeps driving. And so and his little boy is asleep at the time, and later says, "Where's mommy?" And Drayton says, we couldn't we couldn't we
So
couldn't go
so the
that way.
novella doesn't give you closure on that.
It does
Doesn't
not that
confirm.
finality. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
confirmed. He
Mhm.
just
Interesting.
he just can't bear to go that way.
Yeah.
Um Now, the ending of the film, which is very controversial, many people have said how much they loved the film until the ending, and that's one of the really interesting things is, and I think it's a reflection on, maybe a lot of our attitudes about film and about life and so forth.
Yeah.
This is not a happy ending.
Oh,
It
not
is
at all.
it is as tragic as it could possibly be.
Yeah. It is absolutely devastating, and
It's so devastating.
the thing is, it got Stephen King's stamp of approval, so I'm kind of like, "What more do you need?" You know what I mean? Like, they literally changed
So
the ending to his book, and he was like, "You know what? I like that one better,"
yeah,
and
yeah. He really
yeah.
he said it was much better ending.
Mhm.
The thing about it is, so just to explain, if anyone hasn't seen the film yet, and I know we're spoiling it, but it won't ruin, I don't think, the experience. You need to see the film if you haven't. So they are in a Jeep. They're the only survivors that made it out from the breakout.
Mhm.
Um, and to me, the most impactful scene in the entire film is seeing that monstrosity walk by that is 1,000 feet
The
tall,
kaiju,
at
yeah,
l- that
thing,
just
yeah.
giant,
Mhm.
walking with sort of elephant-like legs, and it shows you the scope of the problem that, you know, these creatures are not just infestation that you're going to be able to just wipe out,
Yeah,
but there's something more to it. Um, but then they run out of gas, and they've got a gun with four bullets, and there's five of them in the car. There are creatures all around them. There is a sense of protecting the little boy, not
yeah.
to have him, and he, at several points of the film, don't let the monsters get me. So Drayton says, okay, I will find a way to kill myself, but he shoots the other four. So he is, beyond devastated at this. Wish he pulls the trigger many, many more times.
Mm,
He can't. There's no more bullets. He gets out of the Jeep and literally demands that the mist kill him. Calls out for the creatures, and nothing comes. You're expecting any moment for creatures to come out of the mist and kill him, but
Yeah.
instead, in the horrifying twist, and out of the fog, you see all of these U.S. Army
Mhm.
vehicles coming through with flamethrowers.
Yeah.
They're burning.
Civilians too that they've rescued, and including Carol from The Walking Dead
Yes,
managed to get
yes,
out okay.
yeah. If they had waited 5 minutes,
I
they would have
know,
been
man.
rescued. And instead, he's left saying, why did this happen this way?
Mhm.
The credits start to come in. They
Yeah.
fade in very,
You're just left to sit with that.
just
It's a lot.
left with that. Let me tell you real quick how the novella ends,
Okay.
because it's an inversion, okay? And if I were reading the story, I like the way the novella ended better, okay? For dramatic purposes, to have the world is going to be back to normal, but this one person's own kind of apocalypse has happened, right?
Yeah.
In the story, they drive until they run out of gas and they end up in a um, motel.
Okay.
And he goes into the motel's office and there's a shortwave radio. Um, he's been writing all of this down. This is Drayton. He's the narrator of the
Mhm.
story. And he says, I've been writing all this down. I'm going to leave this here in the motel so that someone can find our story someday if we don't make it. He tunes in on the radio and he doesn't hear anything. He doesn't hear anything. He's about to turn it off and he hears one word and then static swallows it up. He can't tell what the word is, but he says it's one of two things. Both are good, I would say. One, hope. Now, why would someone say hope over the radio? Maybe they're saying, hang on, there's help on the way, so forth.
Maybe your help. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
The other word that he thinks that it is Hartford. So remember, they're in Maine, so the
Yeah.
Hartford, Connecticut would be, you know, down the down the way because they are heading south. They're heading south to try to get out
Yeah.
of the mist. So if it's Hartford, then there's really, a very hopeful thing. But the way the novel ends, you don't know.
Is there a specific reason that Frank Darabont chose to change the ending this way? Is there something he was trying to get across with that, or
Um,
beyond just like the dramatic effect, the dramatic weight of it?
I mean, I think it's just to make it um a little punchier at the
Right.
end.
Mhm.
In a movie, just having someone writing a log in a motel room is not very suspenseful.
Yeah.
For me, and this is something that I've studied quite a bit and thought about quite a bit about horror and monsters and things like that. For me, historically, horror goes back to at least the narrative form is kind of descended to us from morality tales in the Middle Ages, and the idea was supposed to sort of scare you straight, you know, don't do this or the devil's going to get you, was kind of the basic plot of all of
Right.
those morality tales. But and the reason why that's why I think movies like this and like totally different kind of movie, but Hellraiser, the original one, are so powerful is because of the moral dimension of it, and also the other idea that it's not the monsters that get you. It's the other human beings and the way that they act,
In
um,
response to
yes,
yeah,
yes,
the
and
event.
and so, all a lot of the horrible things that happen in the store is because of human beings being human. People have different motives. There's a
Yeah.
lot of pride involved, where the guys convince the bag boy to go outside, convince him to do that.
Mhm.
And when Drayton says that's a terrible idea, they're like, no, we're going to beat you up if you don't let us do this. We've got a problem we've got to solve. Eh, and the same thing with Norton and the other grocery store manager who's very skeptical of everything, doesn't,
Yeah.
they they cause problems because of their unwillingness to kind of work together, and it's their ego that gets in the way.
Yeah.
And
I think that's one thing that really surprised me about the film, at least on my first viewing, was just how deep it kind of goes into exploring just human nature and how
human nature. Hmm.
yeah, when we're trapped in situations of high stress, we become very um we just what's the word? But like we just, we kind of like form factions and all that stuff and
Lord of the Flies, right?
yeah, yeah.
Sort of,
And that kind of goes
when
back to your lifeboat comparison where they're all, just these survivors on a lifeboat, but in the case of this film it's a supermarket. Um yeah, I mean Laurie Holden's character just kind of going on about, mankind's inherent goodness and stuff, and I'm just like
yeah,
every other
yeah.
character is like, you are so incredibly naive, for
You don't have much faith in humanity, do you?
None whatsoever.
I can't accept that. People are basically good, decent. My God, David, we're a civilized society.
Sure, as long as the machines are working and you can dial 911, but you take those things away, you throw people in the dark, you scare the shit out of them. No more rules. You'll see how primitive they get.
because at this point they've been in the store for a couple of days. Many people at this point have already died, right? And
Yeah,
it
yeah.
has reached a point where they're thinking like, are we ever going to get out of this thing? Because it's kind of become their new normal.
The young romance between the cashier and Private Jessup, and it's so honest and decent
Yeah.
and pure, and
And justice for Private Jessup, man. That man goes through it in this movie.
so, I mean, he essentially gets sacrificed
Mhm.
by Miss Carmody, who's kind of a, and I would hesitate to call her a Christian fanatic because whatever she's
Yeah,
promoting isn't very Christian, but she says, there has to be blood to pay for mankind's crimes, and so they stab this poor
yeah.
army guy to death. um and the girl that he likes, she's, I think, the first person to be killed in the store, like, or
Mhm.
besides the bag boy.
Which, by the way, little side tangent. I love the shot. The shot I love probably the most in the entire film is when they're kind of sitting by the windows. This is right before like the bugs and the
Yeah,
terrorists
yeah.
break into the actual store. It's such a
Yeah,
great jump scare,
it
you see
is.
it coming, but like the
Character
intensity
doesn't
of
see
the
it.
sound, yeah, it
Yeah,
really
yeah.
still kind of gives you a bit of a jump, it's great.
It's oh man, yeah, yeah. And there's that bizarre, but it's sort of the point of view of the creature flying. Do
Yeah.
you remember that in
Mhm.
is like
Go through the aisles.
flying around, and man, so much chaos
Mhm.
in that store when they're essentially giant bugs attack. They're trying to use torches. to scare them away or fight them off, which does work. But then the guy spills gasoline everywhere and catches himself on
Yeah.
fire. And then meanwhile, you've got the two guys who turn on the spotlights, and they think there's some kind of miscommunication. They're turning the lights on, which is
Right.
attracting the creatures into the store. Oh my goodness.
Moments like that happen, they don't come across as, like, slapstick, because they
Right,
totally could, you know what I mean? It could be like, "These
right.
kids are so dumb, like, how are we supposed to root for them if this is how they're acting?" But the film makes it very clear that this is, like, a very grounded,
It
um
it feels realistic.
it's real people dealing
You
with
feel
this
like
larger
real
than
people.
life concept that is so beyond them that they can't even really comprehend it, you know?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I wanna call out, you know, Toby Jones' performance as the grocery store manager is really a really cool character.
One of my favorite characters in the whole thing, yeah.
William Sadler, who plays the redneck, and you had an interesting observation about him.
Yeah, I didn't really pick up on this the first time I saw it, but, during my last viewing, which by the way was of the, black and white director's cut, which we'll get into,
Mhm.
very soon, but, uh, one thing I noticed about him is so much of the film has to do with kind of the idea of sort of like mob mentality, especially in a situation
Mhm.
of high stress, you know,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
going, you know, again, kind of the idea of like forming factions and all that stuff and sort of pairing yourself with the majority in order to survive, you know, because in a situation like this, you really don't want to like become an outcast, you know. Um I noticed his character from the beginning has this tendency to sort of just go with the flow. Like when Thomas Jane first hears the noise down kind of in the cellar area from outside. This is before we even know there's like any creatures out there. He just hears like a noise of something trying to like get in, you know.
Right. Something's wanting to get in.
Yeah, yeah. And it could easily be a person, right? It just sounds like there's something like, you know, banging against the metal. And so he gets a few of the employees to go down with him, one of them being William Sadler's character. And he ends up just kind of like underplaying Thomas Jane's concerns. He just goes like, you know, I'm starting to think you didn't hear anything, and you know, we should probably just um turn on the generator. Gets the kid, the teenager that works there to open it. The kid gets, you know, sucked out by the tentacle. He gets killed. um Thomas Jane is understandably very upset because he's just like, hey, you know, if you'd believed me, you wouldn't have opened that and that kid wouldn't have died, you know what I mean? And I love that line, by the way, that Thomas Jane has, a you know, kind of directs at William Sadler's character, where he just goes like, you know, he's a kid. He's supposed to act stupid. What's your excuse? And he immediately goes into kind of like apologetic mode when he sees with his own eyes proof that there's a thing out there, right? Um, but also right after that scene, once they kind of inform like the entire group of people in the store of what is happening, um, you know, Marcia Gay Harden's character just starts going off about how this is God's wrath and everything, and um everyone's just kind of like, you know, lady, shut up. And William Sadler's character is the first person to kind of make a threat towards her. Even before Laurie Holden's character kind of cuts her off by slapping her, he just kind of runs over to her, um, about to attack her, and it takes a bunch of guys to kind of hold him back. Ironically, you see him in the third act of the film with a group of people listening to Marcia Gay Harden's character preach, you know, and he's kind of fully been converted by like the second or third day. Because at that point, like 70% of the store is now listening to her. And I think that a real turning point in the movie I noticed on the second viewing was when the giant bug lands on Marcia Gay
Lands on her.
chest. She
Yeah.
prays and it doesn't kill her. I think that's when a lot of the people in the store start to really take what she's saying to heart, because it's like, why did it choose not to kill her when it's gone after everybody else? It had the perfect opportunity to. It was literally like on top of her and it decided to fly away and let her go. So I think that's when a lot of people in the store kind of started seeing her as this kind of messianic figure or some kind of vessel of God who had all the answers to what was happening. And
Yeah.
so his character included. So I think his character kind of in a weird way encapsulates the grander themes of the story and how people kind of shift into this mob mentality mode when it's convenient for their survival, you know?
That's
Yeah.
yeah. It's that idea of the once the veneer of civilization is broken away, then people start acting
Mhm.
in very tribal, primal,
Yeah.
ways.
You scare people badly enough, you can get them to do anything. They'll turn to whoever promises a solution or whatever.
Ollie, please, back me up here.
I wish I could. As a species, we're fundamentally insane. Put more than two of us in a room, we pick sides and start dreaming up reasons to kill one another. Why do you think we invented politics and religion?
Did you have any other observations about the black and white version since I haven't seen that version?
Yes, definitely. So there was a kind of like a message from Frank Darabont that appeared. It was like 5 minutes or so, but it appeared right before the film started, and he said that um from like the beginning, he kind of envisioned the film being in black and white. 'Cause Stephen King told him himself that when he was writing the novella, that he was thinking a lot of the Burt I. Gordon like monster movies,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and that kind of informed Frank Darabont's decision to do that because he kind of almost saw this kind of giving it like this B movie quality, and it definitely has that. I would say my biggest surprise is I felt like in huge chunks of it that I was watching a completely different film than the one that was in
Oh,
color, you know?
hmm.
Um, I think both in good ways and in bad ways, the scenes that I think were really improved with with it being in black and white were the scenes involving like the creatures and all that stuff, especially the scene where they go into the pharmacy. All the scenes, all the exterior scenes with the fog, just when they're actually in the cloud of mist, look phenomenal in black and white. I think they look even better than they did in color.
Oh,
I think it does undercut some of the human drama, just because it does. I think it succeeds so well in getting that kind of like Twilight Zone effect that some of the more kind
I
of
was literally thinking of the Twilight Zone.
yeah, some of the more
Yeah.
down to earth, like, kind of gritty moments, especially, like, at the beginning, there's a lot of, like, kind of these handheld, like, zooms and all that
Yep.
stuff, the different
Yeah.
characters. The black and white feels very heightened, and then the stuff at the beginning feels much, kinda more handheld and almost more guerrilla style filmmaking,
Gotcha.
yeah. Um, but, uh, yeah, I mean, I think a good chunk of it was improved. The visual effects definitely looked better in black and white, but yeah, the scene where they go into the pharmacy and they see all the people, like, kind of tangled in the webs and stuff, I think was
Whew.
exponentially more horrifying with just, the kind of the heavy contrast of black and white because it was even harder to really make out anything.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just I would say the mist itself just looked cooler in black and white.
Mm.
But it almost made me feel like I was watching a movie that didn't really come out in the modern era, like, it really felt like
A
like
throwback.
a throwback B movie, like a creature
Mhm.
feature from, like, the '60s, you know?
Mm.
And, so Frank Darabont said that, the black and white version of the film and the color version of the film both remind him of movies that he grew up watching.
Oh, oh,
Mhm.
very nice. Well, it's so funny. Yeah, Twilight Zone was going through my mind as to what to compare this to.
Right.
Funnily enough, there is a Twilight Zone episode called "The Monsters Are on Maple Street," and it's about the same kind of scenario with people all in a small town. Um, Believing that some kind of either an invasion has happened or something, and they all start turning on each other. And of course, the point is, and Rod Serling does that in many of the stories that he did. Is, the monsters are the people on on Maple Street.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's and there's not a big bad um monster that's the villain in the film, but if the film has a true villain, it's Carmody, Ms. Carmody,
The
when she
mist almost serves as like a backdrop, you know what I mean?
yes,
If
yes.
it's like it's the inciting incident that gets these people to kind of turn against each other, you know? It traps them in an environment,
And
and being in
how
an environment with someone you don't like for an extended period of time would make anyone go crazy. So,
and it makes
uh,
perfect sense that,
yeah,
Frank Darabont with The Walking Dead later, that you're dealing with the similar sort of thing.
definitely, yeah.
It's the
Yeah,
same
and
sort
more
of
on that note, a lot of the cast members from The Walking Dead, that he would later go on to cast in that series
Mhm.
were in this film. This came out in 2007, I believe, which
Yep,
the first season of The
2007.
Walking Dead premiered in 2010. You got Carol
Melissa McBride and
Dale from,
Laurie
I was gonna
Lau
say Daryl, but it's Dale from the first 2 seasons of The Walking Dead.
I know what kind of man you are.
The old man.
Oh, yeah, Jeffrey DeMunn.
Yes,
Yep,
he's in a,
yep,
a
yep.
huge he plays a
Huge
huge part
part.
in this
Uh-huh.
movie. I also noticed, a very
Laurie
small.
Holden.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I noticed, a very small, he has a very small presence in this movie. I didn't even notice him the first time, but, Morales from the first season of The Walking Dead. As much as I hated Marcia Gay Harden's character, I think that's a testament to how well she played
Oh,
her
yeah,
part. You know,
yeah.
you're supposed to hate her, and I think even the second time I was just like, I think I hated her even more the second. I'm really surprised that she was not given an Oscar nomination for this performance.
She really should have been.
It is one of, like, I think my favorite villain performances I've come across in quite some time. It's a very memorable character it's just a gripping character that you hate, you know?
Yes.
Literally from the first scene, you're like, "This is just such an unpleasant human being," you know, before you even figure out she's a religious zealot.
And it seems to me that I think Stephen King has had other characters like her
Mhm.
in some other films, but I'm not, or other stories, but
Right.
I'm not immediately thinking of them. I'm sure other people can, but I think we've run our course. What are we still looking at the conversation and enemy of the state for next time?
Yeah, I think that's a great topic for a
Okay.
second episode, yeah.
Okay.
Both
Excellent.
both, featuring one featuring Gene Hackman and one starring Gene Hackman. Uh,
Mhm.
Both very similar films, and you even mentioned that Gene Hackman in it almost kind of reprises his character from The Conversation, just not the same
Yeah, I
not
mean,
the
an
same
enemy
weight.
of the
He's
state is
serving
is
the same purpose, yeah.
is definitely it's an action film
Mhm.
versus the conversation, which is
Right.
almost motionless.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it'll be fun to look at those. And so I hope everyone will pass this along, subscribe, like, and forward the podcast. And until we see you next time, that'll be goodbye.